BASIX. BASIX, I don't even really know how to pronounce it, and it's a pretty awful acronym as you're about to discover. What is it? It stands for the building. Yeah, that's a BU, even though whatever. BASIX doesn't sound as good. BASIX. The building sustainability index. So this is a way to score buildings according to how well they adhere to sustainability guidelines. Now, when you hear that word sustainability, what kinds of things come to mind?
For the future needs.
Okay, good. We want to make sure that things are going to last, right? We're going to use it. Yeah, hooray, our geography people. We're going to use resources in a way that stewards them effectively so that we're not going to, burn through the environment. In what ways would a building maybe be sustainable or not sustainable? Can someone think of an example?
Cracks in the ceiling.
Okay, all right. So think about this. Sustainability and sort of lasting are really sort of shorthand for environmental sustainability.
Gas leaks.
Right? So we're thinking about things such as, think about the design of a building. And the design of a building has a really big influence, Eliana. The design of a building has a really big influence on things like how much water that building consumes, how much electricity it consumes. Those are the main resources that a building will consume, and will consume differently depending on the way that it's constructed. Okay? So for example, with regard to water, does a building have, say, rainwater tanks attached to it? Like the rain runs off, and then where does it go? Where does our rain go? Mostly into the drains. In fact, if you look closely, you can see our gutters, because they're so massive, our gutters actually have release valves in them. Do you notice that? Which kind of makes them funny, because gutters are actually supposed to, in general terms, stop that happening, so that when you're walking along the side of the building, water is not just gushing off. But because the surface area of our roofs is so large, it needs someone to go, otherwise it will just overflow. So things like where the water's going, so like, are there rainwater collection tanks? What about electricity? What would make something good in terms of electricity or poor? Okay, the obvious one is solar. What else though? What else would affect the electricity usage of a building? Okay, so for example, in this room, in this very room, in fact in this block, right? You guys know, when it hits a certain time, what happens to the lights? Yep. Okay. Okay, good. We're getting to a few other things here. So then you talk about, say, natural light and natural ventilation. So I don't know how many of you have noticed this, but if you peer out the window, not that one, but that one, right? Did you notice that if you actually walk through here, there's some lights, but usually they're off. Does anyone know how that's lit? There's not windows. It's an interior. It's a skylight, right? In fact, there's two right there, which is why that spot is so bright. Okay. So all of these kinds of factors contribute. So that's what it is, the Building Sustainability Index. Who does it apply to? If your building is sort of, well, suppose it has a very, very poor sustainability index, is it a good idea just to knock it down? Probably not, because that's not going to be necessarily sustainable either, unless it's like a train wreck of a building and it's, really disastrous. Most buildings that are already existent are just sort of left where they are. However, if you've got new dwellings, okay, for instance, in fact, if you find a lot of the office blocks in the city, they actually have a whole bunch of greenery around them, like within the building and on the edges, because that's part of, again, sustainability factors. So this affects new dwellings. However, we're all interested in it because obviously if your building has a bad index, that's bad, full stop, whether you've got a new building or not. Okay, so how does it work? And now you need to look at your devices. Thank you. Okay, now, I hope you got devices there. Let's walk through this. Now, there's so much information here that it's really important we don't lose the forest for the trees. So just eyes up for a second. I want to draw your attention to this. Does anyone know what this document is? That's the syllabus. I'm glad some people recognize it. Okay. So you can see we're in the focus study on resources. Energy and sustainability is no surprise, given that we're looking at the sustainability index right now. I want you to have a look down this sort of dot point list. Okay. How far do you have to get down before you start talking about the basics? It's just those last two. It's just the last two. Now, the reason why I want to make sure that you have a clear idea of what these last two are is that the basics is a big deal. It's a really important social and legislative structure, and there's lots of information to it. It's really easy just to get lost. We are looking at it from a mathematical standpoint, not from a, like, we could spend a whole year studying this and making sure we wrap our heads around it. This would probably be not mathematics, but geography. So we are going to look at the mathematical part of it, which means these two things. I want you to start with this last one. Identify the issues addressed in the basics, e.g. area site, water, thermal comfort, and energy. We just started to talk about that, but we're going to look at that in more detail for this lesson. Then, second last one, this is really where this comes in. Calculate building sustainability measures based on the requirements of the basics. Can you write that down for me? This is an important phrase. You don't need the whole thing, but calculate building sustainability measures. Can you write that phrase down? And then I will tell you what it means. This is what you're going to get asked to do in a paper, right? A sustainability measure is something like, how much power does this building use? When you switch on all of its lights for a normal business day, how much is it going to consume over the course of that day, month, year? That is a sustainability measure, right? Or how much water is this this apartment block, is it going to consume in its current environment? How much rain is it going to consume which can offset that? That is a sustainability measure. So as an example, I think it was either last year or the year before, bless you.
Thank you.
The question that got posed in relation to that was something simple like, so-and-so has a building. In order to meet his requirements for the water sustainability measure, there's an important number I want you to write down. Do it over here for water, which is 40%. That's a really important number for you to know. One of the requirements of the BASIX certification is that if you've got a new dwelling or a new structure, it needs to use 40% less. I don't know if this is potable or potable. It looks like it's spelled potable, but English doesn't have good rules. 40% less potable water use versus an average building before BASIX was introduced. Okay, so that number exists. It's on the website. You can go hunt it down later on. But the point is, we want to design the building such that it's using less water than we used before. So the question said, so-and-so is using this much water year to year. This is how much his bills have been going if you add up all 4 quarters. But he needs to hit this 40% less benchmark. How much less water is he going to have to use if this year he used however many number of kiloliters? Okay. So do you see how the calculation is involved? You're going to have to work out, well, what is 40% less? How am I going to meet that requirement? And then how much am I going to have to reduce my current usage by? So in some ways, it's less a question about all of this, and that's really a percentage question. That's all it is, okay? But that's because percentages are useful all the time, and they come up when people are trying to get their certificate for this. You are going to have to do this. This is the least mathematical part of it, but it doesn't really make much sense to calculate numbers if you don't know what those numbers are about. So identifying the issues addressed, that was why I said all of this. This is kind of, in a nutshell, there's more detail for it, which is why you're on the website.